in a constant state of fear and misery. We are misery anymore. And live in a constant state of fear and misery. We are live in a constant state of fear and misery. We are misery anymore. And I don't even notice anymore.
Alrighty, what is up, everybody? Today is Thursday, May 2nd, and we're bringing you Block Digest 174 at block height 574,295. What's crack-a-lacking?
Oh, nothing much. Just, getting everything ready for the show, man. Got a lot of stuff going. Pretty good weather. Been through some tumultuous weather, just like the news. It's been a little tumultuous, getting back to steady to where we could break it down. How about you guys, Nopar? How you doing, man?
Well, so many things are happening. Maybe in the next show I will add a lot of things to the news desk before you guys fill it up.
Alrighty.
I'm all for
I'm going
that.
to hold you to that.
Happy pre-World Press Freedom Day.
Is that what it is? Today is the Free Press World Freedom Day?
Stop making up
No.
holidays, Janine. That's not a real thing.
I mean, I can explain to you how much of a real holiday it is. It's been a holiday since 1993. But no, it's not today. It's actually tomorrow. But for some reason, I don't remember what part of the organization it is, but the UN is holding a conference in Ethiopia for the past, this is the second day. And then tomorrow is the actual World Press Freedom Day.
Crazy. I don't know how we could talk about free press with all this stuff going on with Assange, but I think you got an update for us on that later.
Alrighty. So I guess there is no stalling this, is there?
Oh no! I mean, yeah, this was the big piece, man, and it's this thing keeps coming up. Let's dice into it.
Is this the tarred and tethered section of today?
It's my favorite topic ever. Can't you guys hear the joy in my voice? Can't you tell how much I love fucking talking about this? Can't you feel it?
I knew you were gonna be excited about it.
Alrighty. So, I'm sure in the past week, because this happened literally the day after the last episode, everybody has been following this very closely. And I'm willing to bet that 95% of you watching right now have no clue what's actually going on and have been following narratives and memes instead of actually digging down into the facts, like tends to happen every single time that Tether pops up in a news cycle. So, first up is the actual filing by the Office of the Attorney General in New York. So I guess let's start off here. The investigation that the Attorney General started began late 2018 as a result of users complaining about delayed withdrawals not being processed in a timely manner on the fiat side of things, which everybody should remember actually coincided with a short dip of a decent level in the Tether price on the floating market that was not being redeemed directly through either Bitfinex or Tether. And so that's what kicked off the long filing that we are now all having fun with. And there's a couple of different concerns in here I want to get started with. And first off was one of the first things that people started memeing about and drawing attention to is the Attorney General's suspicion that New York individuals were trading on Bitfinex. And it's public knowledge that prior to 2017, around the latter part of that year, there were people from the United States, likely including New York, trading on the Bitfinex platform. And they were actually levied a fine by FinCEN for allowing U.S. customers to access their leverage products, which was a violation of laws and regulations in the United States. And Finex initially just prevented U.S. customers from trading on leverage, and then eventually moved to completely bar U.S. customers from accessing the platform at all, with the exception of pretty much Americans that incorporated under certain conditions or outside of the United States, which classifies them as an ECP or eligible contract participants. And this is, not something unique to the cryptocurrency space. There are a lot of places that Americans are not allowed to engage in financial trading or speculation, and they just incorporate as an entity to actually do that in a legal manner. So this is not uncommon at all in all kinds of markets. And when you really boil down to the core of it, the only seeming evidence of involvement with New York individuals is either past employees or registered ECPs who legally are allowed to trade. So that is done. Bullshit, bullshit, and bullshit. So obviously now, to get to the core of the point, is everything going on with crypto capital, the Tether reserves, and Bitfinex's relationship. And so when I first saw this, before I actually dug through all of the shit floating around and got to the meat of it, I thought that this entire situation was very fucking shady. And I still think that it is to some degree, although absolutely nowhere near as shady as I initially thought after sifting through all of the information, looking at the relevant timetables, and specifically where in time each of the individual events involved in this whole clusterfuck actually happened in sequence. And so pretty much the root of this is Crypto Capital, a processing or payment processing company that was handling the process of withdrawals for Bitfinex customers, having funds seized by multiple governments. And I will, at the end of this, come back more to Crypto Capital as a focus. But for now, I want to stick with Bitfinex's involvement with them. And so initially, the problem was Crypto Capital effectively starting to have problems processing withdrawals themselves, and this leading to the delay in withdrawals that occurred in late 2018, which actually drew the Attorney General's attention in the first place. And in communications with Bitfinex, Crypto Capital was effectively saying that some accounts were being frozen when they went to go access money, and that they were confident that this money would be released in a short time. So what Bitfinex did in response to this was effectively shuffle money from a Tether account at a different institution, Deltec, to Finex's account, and then regarding their accounts held at Crypto Capital, moved an equivalent amount from Finex's account there to Tether's account there. So effectively what they were doing is just shuffling money between these two accounts at two separate financial institutions to cancel each other out. So they were just debiting Tether's account for Finex on one side and then vice versa on the other. And based on their communications at the time, they were under the impression that these funds would be recoverable in a reasonable short amount of time and that they would not be held in limbo for a very long period. Now, as time moved on, this actually their opinion on this changed, and they became worried that these funds would not be accessible for a long time, or potentially that crypto capital was actually lying and effectively defrauding them and blaming their fraud on government seizure of accounts held by crypto capital. And so during this time, the Attorney General putting together their investigation was actually reaching out to Finex for a number of documents to investigate this. Now, they did not respond to the initial demand for documents and a meeting that the Attorney General set up, but they did coordinate for a meeting in April this year, I believe, if I have the dates correct, where the attorneys for Tether and Bitfinex actually met in person with the Attorney General's office. Now, at the time of this meeting, the attorneys for Finex and Tether voluntarily informed the Attorney General's office of the situation with crypto capital and the inaccessibility of the funds that they were holding on both institutions' behalf. So this was not something that was dragged out of either company by the Attorney General. It's not something that was discovered by subpoena or a legal process. It is something that Finex and Tether voluntarily informed not only the Attorney General of, but also the Department of Justice. So at this time, Finex came to the American authorities and asked for assistance and clarification and handling of their funds being locked up while in custody of this other company processing payments for them. Now, at this point, they also told the Attorney General that they were planning on the arrangement that exists right now, where Tether would effectively loan Bitfinex at a 6.5% interest rate funds to allow Finex to continue operating and processing withdrawals while these funds were tied up in the seized accounts or stolen accounts of crypto capital. Now, from this point, the Attorney General moved forward and requested more information about what was going on in this, documents backing it up. And Tether and Finex went forward and finalized this line of credit between Tether and Bitfinex. And one thing I would like to point out as well is that in the construction of this arrangement, I spoke earlier of account shuffling effectively between Tether and Bitfinex at both Deltec and the crypto capital accounts, where they effectively shuffled money from Tether to Finex and the Deltec accounts, and then Finex to Tether in the crypto capital accounts. These fund movements were classified as being part of a loan under the loan or line of credit agreement between Tether and Finex. So even though if these funds are recovered, this is considered part of a loan, and Finex is on the hook for that interest to Tether, even though if these funds are recovered, all of it's there, and all they did was effectively play accounting games. So that is something to point out, and most of the line of credit has been exhausted through this simple shuffling of money at different locations. Now, the big gist of what the Attorney General was asking for in this filing was not an injunction against Bitfinex or Tether operating, but an attempt to prevent Finex from drawing any more credit from Tether in this line of credit agreement. And that was done under the auspices of protecting potential New York investors or users of Tether from loss in the case of doing so. And also, the other big part of their complaint effectively was that this was not publicly disclosed. And that's really the key point that I initially thought was pretty shady. And I still, to some degree, think it's kind of shady. But looking at all of the timetables involved here, we covered when it happened, Tether altering their terms of service to say that Tether is not solely backed by cash reserves anymore, but also by cash equivalents and potentially loans to other related companies as far as actually backing the Tether token. And looking at the timetables involved here, that update to the Tether terms was done prior to the line of credit agreement between Tether and Finex being arranged. And so really, when you get down to it, the Attorney General's office of not disclosing this arrangement is kind of horseshit. And I say kind of because the change in Tether's terms was explicitly stated publicly, covered very widely in the ecosystem, and there is absolutely no way any person trading in this space can argue that they were not aware of this change. So that to say that it was not disclosed at all is complete horseshit. But why I say it's still kind of shady is because even though they disclosed this change in Tether's terms of service and the fact that some of Tether's backing was now loans to other related companies, they did not disclose the situation involving the funds frozen at Crypto Capital. So while not being entirely forthcoming about what was going on behind the scenes, they did disclose enough to make the risks to Tether users very clear, beyond the shadow of a doubt, to the point where there is absolutely no basis to claim that anybody using or holding Tether is not aware of the situation that changed regarding what is backing Tether. So there is definitely still something shady about this situation, but absolutely nowhere to the magnitude that the Attorney General's office or many other people out there memeing narratives is trying to paint it as. Okay. Now to get into the response to the Attorney General's filing. Tether and Bitfinex's lawyer filed a response effectively pointing out a lot of what I have so far, especially the fact that they voluntarily informed the Attorney General's office about the situation with Crypto Capital months ago. They informed them about the plan for the line of credit arrangement between Tether and Bitfinex. And more importantly, that they publicly disclosed at least the aspect involving the change in Tether's terms. So the way the Attorney General's filing was attempting to overblow and portray the situation is just unbelievably manipulated. And especially given the fact that the Attorney General's rationale in doing this and the injunction preventing use of the line of credit is done under the auspices of protecting market participants, in reality, all the filing has done is pretty much perpetuate misinformation, create uncertainty in the market, and at least in the aftermath of the filing, resulted in a massive downward movement that unquestionably resulted in a very large number of people losing a lot of money during that market movement, especially anybody trading or using any kind of leverage products that would have hit liquidation points. Now, as far as the actual arrangement between Tether and Bitfinex, he specifically looked back to the history of banking relationships that Finex has had and the problems that has caused as far as why they were involved with using crypto capital to process withdrawals or store funds in the first place, which is absolutely not something unique to Bitfinex. This is really a universal situation for the vast majority of exchanges in this ecosystem. And as far as the state of Tether, explicitly admitted that in terms of cash reserves, they are only at effectively 74% of the current circulating Tether supply in terms of hard cash reserves. and that fully drawing down the line of credit from Tether to Bitfinex would bring them down to 68%. But in doing this, he referred to the general history of Tether redemptions and the average amounts, which were around 550,000 or something like that a day, with the biggest peak in a single day being 24 million redeemed at a single time. And pretty much pointed out that compared to fractional reserve banks in the United States, which only have to have 10% of their outstanding liabilities and reserves, Tether is effectively capitalized to 700% of the federal requirement there. And unless literally every single Tether out there in existence is demanded redemption all at once, there's no realistic scenario in which Tether is going to wind up being unable to redeem the Tethers that people approach them for redemption. Now, again, like I said, when they first initially changed those terms of service to include cash equivalents as well as loans to other entities, that is something really that is nobody else's business except people using Tether. And that is their own judgment call to make as to whether or not they want to use that token. Like, that is a risk assessment for them to make. And really, I don't care as somebody who doesn't use Tether. I don't think it's very likely that a bank run on Tether big enough to make them completely unable to redeem everything is likely to happen, especially given, at least so far, the market reaction to all of this news. Now, the last part of his response is effectively asking for a dismissal of the injunction that the Attorney General's office is trying to file against Tether and Bitfinex, preventing the future use of this line of credit, in that the inability to access that is actually something that would cause harm and prevent the normal operations of Bitfinex as a business, which in the Attorney General's filing was one of the things that was explicitly stated, that they had absolutely no intention and wanted to take steps to prevent any interference with the operation of Bitfinex or Tether. Now, in response to this filing, a New York Supreme Court judge has actually tentatively agreed with this motion to vacate the order and is now requiring the petitioners in this case to prove before the court cause for not vacating this order, which would allow Bitfinex to continue accessing this line of credit up to the contractually arranged agreement between Tether and Bitfinex. So as of right now, May 6th, I believe, is the court date in which this will be heard and a decision made as to whether or not Finex will be allowed to continue tapping that line of credit. Now to go back to crypto capital and hopefully get this done with, because Jesus Christ, I can't remember the last time I have talked this long consistently on this show. So crypto capital has existed since 2013 was when a post. Okay, let me wind back. A post was made by an anonymous Redditor in 2013 talking about the need for a bank to be set up from scratch to service Bitcoin users and participants in the ecosystem. And the next year, crypto capital was effectively established in Panama and began by raising 30,000 Bitcoin, around $300,000 at the time, through Havelock Investments, which is something that actually it facilitated the IPO very early on of Bitcoin-related businesses. And it was actually something that Satoshi Dice, Eric Voorhees' company, his gambling site, used way back in the day. on MPEX, which is a exchange ran by Popesco. If anybody knows him, he is the nutcake that Krista Rose likes to cite as the benchmark for what is really Bitcoin. Obviously, Voorhees was fined for an illegal securities offering, which was a $35,000 fine at the time, and barred from security offerings for 5 years. But Havelock Investments was involved in a lot of early IPOs very early on in this space. And effectively, Crypto Capital went on to become a payment processor involved with a lot of companies in this space. Coinapult is actually one of them, which ironically, at the same time Bitfinex was having trouble processing withdrawals, effectively shut down the aspects of their service for purchasing crypto because they too were having issues working with Crypto Capital for the fiat side of things. Now, Crypto Capital was later acquired by a Switzerland company, Global Trade Solutions, which also has a company by that same name registered in the UK, both under the name of a man, Reginald Fowler, who is really seen on a lot of the companies involved with this, as well as a man, Ivan Manuel Molina Lee. Now, pretty much the gist of Crypto Capital is the ownership, which is held by this global trade solutions company in Switzerland. It pretty much would just register shell companies to open bank accounts under the name of, process business for their customers through those accounts until they were shut down, and then move on and open up new shell companies and new accounts. And this is pretty much how they were able to adapt and continue processing fiat payments despite the kind of landscape that a lot of crypto businesses have to deal with regarding fiat payments. Now, other noted customers of Crypto Capital have been Kraken and Binance, which both use them for an extended period of time due to their own banking troubles, as well as Quadriga CX, which purportedly some of their fiat side issues, like not speaking at all to the fractional reserve on the crypto side of what they were supposed to be holding, were put down to issues with Crypto Capital. And keep in mind that, you know, these issues with Quadriga, with Coinapult, like these are all coinciding in the same time frame as the initial problems with Bitfinex and their withdrawal interruptions that initially got the attention of the Attorney General's office. So actually, I do believe yesterday or early today, 2 people involved with Crypto Capital have actually been indicted by the Department of Justice. You know, just days after, like almost a little less than a week after the initial filing by the Attorney General's office. And now this last part is just entirely speculation on my part, armchair lawyering at its best. But in my opinion, it looks potentially like the Attorney General's office filing this injunction and issues with Bitfinex possibly could have fucked up the Department of Justice's investigation of Crypto Capital, which again, I will remind you, was voluntarily brought to their attention as well as the Attorney General's office a few months ago, because it just seems very odd to me when you look at how long these types of investigations, not just in the crypto space, but in general, take to really put everything together and target people on charges. It just seems very rushed that having just been brought to their attention in February by Bitfinex, unless there was already a pre-existing investigation for a long stretch of time into Crypto Capital. If the DOJ's investigation began with it being brought to their attention by Finex in February, then this just seems very rushed in terms of actually moving to indictments against people. And so if that is when the DOJ's case against an investigation of crypto capital began, then I think it's not impossible that the Attorney General rushing to file these charges publicly against Finex effectively forced the DOJ to rush their own indictments, because now all of these things that were previously part of a private investigation are now subject to public scrutiny and knowledge, which potentially could have allowed people involved in crypto capital to start covering tracks, taking moves to destroy evidence and so on. But again, that's just my speculation, and only really holds if this DOJ investigation began with it being brought to their attention by Finex in February. And so with that, I am done. Fuck this topic, and more importantly, fuck everybody in this ecosystem who is being a complete retard, claiming Tether has been printing money out of thin air the entire time, all of Bitfinex nonsense, because yet again, this specific case, for like the third time, proves that the exact opposite of that is true. Yes, they are effectively fractional reserve right now, but all of the information drug out into the public eye because of this proves this is a very recent development. And prior to this situation, they were absolutely not fractional reserve, and they were absolutely not printing money out of thin air. I am done now.
Whew, man. Yeah, that's a good long explainer about what exactly is going on right now, because, yeah, I mean, it was like we're saying, I mean, this was a big chunk of what people were been talking about. And, like the chat saying, I mean, we've got these headlines about Tether only being 74% backed. And, yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff.
Shit.
You forget that part?
I know. I forgot something. Audio, thank you for reminding me about that. One last aspect is there are rumors going around that Bitfinex is planning to issue a token to deal with this situation. And this information was put forward by a shareholder of Bitfinex who is the originator of this proposal. So the person talking publicly about this token idea is the person who came up with the idea and brought it to Bitfinex. And as of right now, there has been absolutely no conversation or no confirmation from Bitfinex they are planning on doing this. This is just one shareholder with an idea talking publicly about this. So until Bitfinex confirms it as a company, this is absolutely not something confirmed to be happening. Right. Sorry to cut you off, Rick. I forgot about that part. I wanted to get that out there.
No, that's all right, man. I mean, like, there's a lot to get out and try to clear the air on all this stuff. And I mean, it is confusing. I mean, like you're saying, I mean, there's a lot of shuffling around, and, the mechanics of trying to keep the fiat withdrawals open is complicated. And I mean, it's something that's built into the fact that these regulators are coming after these guys so hard. And like you're saying, I mean, this was all kind of like the whole crypto capital thing with the funds being seized, and then that sort of delaying the withdrawals, which started the initial AG, letters. I mean, it does seem like there's this, path to try and catch Bitfinex and put down Tether. And I mean, it's really just headlines. Like, we're seeing the market. I mean, we fell like $300 or $400 somewhere around there, and Tether fell from $1 to 98 cents. But now Tether's back up to $1, and Bitcoin's back to nearly 5,500. There is this premium going on there with Bitfinex. I mean, right now they're trading Bitcoin around 57.40 and BitMEX around 53.70. I mean, like, there's some odd things going on there, but I imagine like all this stuff will eventually be normalized as soon as all the FUD goes away. But I mean, for sure, the whole idea of that loan possibly being exhausted, that could possibly put these guys in a crunch as far as on the Bitfinex side of the equation, huh?
I mean, possibly. I mean, the premium is to be expected in a situation like that. Some people are just going to panic and try to get out through crypto because it's quick and it's clean and you're done. But as far as the line of credit, there's still, I think, like $100 or $150 million they can draw from on that before the current arrangement is dealt with. And like I said, unless there is just an absolute bank run on everything, I don't think that that's going to like explode. But like that could happen. And I mean, really, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is if something like that were to happen, then it's kind of a little unclear right now as to whether it would be Tether or Bitfinex that winds up pretty much going under. Because effectively, right now, the arrangement is Tether, if you count the debt and the collateralized shares of Bitfinex, is whole, just not entirely with cash reserves. And so if something were to happen to Bitfinex, the issue is here Bitfinex has to maintain profitability to service that loan and pay it back. And if Bitfinex were to go under, they are still on the hook for that arrangement with Tether. And I'm not really clear on the priorities here, but if they were to go under and enter any kind of bankruptcy, I would imagine that Tether would be a priority in bankruptcy proceedings to pay that back. And so, at least from a completely armchair lawyer perspective, I think it would be more likely that Bitfinex would wind up effectively crashing down and Tether might survive in the event that a worst case bank run happened.
Yeah, I mean, like I was thinking something similar along those lines. I mean, Tether was something. It's all right. Like it was, last night, I went to a meetup and these blockchain guys, and they went through this long spiel about Maker and DAI and XDAI and how this stuff all collateralizes a way to create some stable coin that they want to use, but everybody just wants to point at Tether and say, well, this is the problem. And it's like, man, you guys are creating your own convoluted mechanical ways of trying to solve this problem. And this is a hard problem to solve. And this has been the best temporary solution that there is out there right now. And I mean, like, it's hard to say that it's hard for me to see the idea that Tether could just fall down, because it seems to be a very useful thing that's necessary for the mechanics of the market to function. I mean, like, sure, there are all these upcoming stable coins coming out that are much more regulated, and I'm sure we'll see some sort of alliances with those. But when it comes to the idea of there being a crypto market that's unregulated, it's hard to see how that functions without something like Tether.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely necessary at this point to not only keep the market in line with each other as far as exchanges through arbitrage, but also just a number of exchanges that really don't have access to fiat liquidity without something like Tether. Like, they would not be able to have US dollar markets.
Well, like I'm saying, Tether's back to his dollar, but the bigger sign here is Bitcoin's back up. Bitcoin's moving up in the face of bad news, and you guys all know what that means. Janine Nopar, do you have any comment on what's going on here?
Before Shinobi started his long speech, the only thing that came to my mind when I heard Bitfinex is Bet32 sendability so much to ask? And now Shinobi finished his long speech, and I feel like, yes, it is.
Yeah, they certainly got a lot on their plate. Janine, do you have any comment either?
No, because once again, I find the Wall Street Journal and a bunch of other journalists reporting on this to be absolute idiots, and I'm just tired of this conversation.
It is one that keeps coming up, and we have spent a long time on it, man. So let's keep moving. Where are we going next?
Real quick, at least you didn't have to talk about it for 30 minutes straight, Janine.
Well, that's only online.
All right, but you want to take us to the next one, though?
Yeah, the next one is a article from Hard Fork saying that someone has been pretending to be an officer from the Berkeley Police Department and has been calling people in California specifically, claiming that they are being investigated for, quote, drug trafficking and fraudulent activities, and then demanding that they, quote, hand over all of their money in their bank account in Bitcoin. Now, I'm not clear whether that means that they were targeting people who were likely to have Bitcoin already, or if they meant that they were demanding that people convert their money into Bitcoin and then send it to the scammer. I'm assuming the latter, but the scam is even dumber than the more infamous IRS one, because most people would only need to use their brains for 2 seconds to realize that no actual police department anywhere in the United States would actually demand money in Bitcoin for any reason, at least not yet, because we haven't quite sunk to that baseline for corruption. Furthermore, I mean, the reason this is possible and the reason they haven't caught this person yet is because caller IDs are incredibly stupid and useless. So this mystery person has been able to mask their real number by actually displaying the official phone numbers of the police and emergency services. So people actually think it's the police department calling them, or at least they're confused and wonder how they're able to do that. So yeah, if you get a call from someone who either appears or is really from the Berkeley Police Department, just hang up, because you can't, either way, you can't get in trouble for not answering the phone from a police department, because in an age where millennials would rather catch the plague than answer a phone call, you have plenty of excuses, and it's not against the law to not answer the phone.
Yeah, there's so many of those scams out there, you know, where they try to call and say, I'm the IRS and you've got to get me all your money right now because you owe this much money and we're going to bring a lawsuit against you. And it's incredible how many people fall for these things. And you see videos of it all the time, where, not all the time, but you do see videos where some people start to realize the scam and how upsetting it is. And it's got to be just as upsetting, or even more so, if they're like getting into your Bitcoin. But for sure, that seems like red flags everywhere. Don't, you know, if you're in Bitcoin, you should be seeing those red flags. If someone calls and says, like, you know, we're with the police department, you got to give us your Bitcoin.
Hello, hello. This is the computer store. We've detected a problem with your Windows. Hello, hello, hello.
Oh man, yeah. Everybody's got some sort of gimmick to try and get people to hand over some money. That's, yeah, guys, just avoid those sort of phone numbers where it's obvious, like, who the hell are these people? Let them leave a voicemail, listen to it, think about it. Don't let them get you on the phone and start pushing you into a position where you got to start thinking on the fly.
What are you trying to say, Mr. Nopara?
Well, I have a Windows joke again. Your thing was pretty stupid, because we all know that Windows don't have problems. Never.
I knew he was going to come up and say Windows has got no issue.
Fucking Microsoft.
But okay. But thinking about this, a couple of years ago, I told my grandma to bring the mouse here, and I was showing on the monitor, and she actually grabbed the mouse and started to push against the monitor. So, I mean, there are probably people who fall for even very, very basic stuff, but we wouldn't even think about that people would fall for this kind of things. So it's sad.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, it's probably a good thing that people likely to fall for things like this are probably using things like Coinbase as a majority, because a service like Coinbase can effectively blacklist addresses they find associated with scams like this and warn people or prevent those transfers in order to safeguard users who are frankly stupid enough to fall for something like this. You know what I mean?
That's a silver lining on Coinbase for sure. But yeah, like that is a point. Yeah, for sure. They can track that. All right, man. So that's some things that are upsetting for some people. What's going on in India, man? This might be an upsetting situation over there too.
Yeah, so we have been following this situation since the Reserve Bank of India instituted a circular banning crypto businesses from interacting with fiat services. And now there is apparently a banning of cryptocurrencies and regulation of official digital currencies bill circulating between a number of different government parties. And the people, or at least the institutions pushing for this in India include the Department of Economic Affairs, the Central Board of Direct Taxes, the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, the Investor Education and Protection Fund Authority, and they are endorsing wholly the idea of banning the sale, purchase, and issuance of all types of cryptocurrencies. And this is pretty much, seemingly the result of the committee that has been set up to mull over the issue over the past half year or so in India. And they've also said that they plan on using the Prevention of Money Laundering Act powers to attempt to deal with these issues before this bill is passed. And there's really two other things to point out. Is this is pretty much just a proposal right now that is going to be put forward to the new government that will take charge after elections this month. So this is effectively the result, seemingly, of the current bureaucracy, and has to be put forward and pushed through by the new government after elections at the end of May. And also a big part of the rationale here, I think, is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs discussing this with the Department of Economic Affairs is pretty much that the sale and purchase of cryptocurrencies is being done by individuals and companies on false inducements of massive returns, as they say. And that such schemes are neither transparent nor fall within regulated legal framework and are being run as Ponzi schemes. And so this is kind of a little unclear to me as to whether or not they're referring to actual Ponzi schemes, simply using cryptocurrencies as a means to move money for them, which is undeniably something happening in India and China and all over the world. And I mean, we've seen multiple instances of this blow up into global news stories over the years. So that is undeniably something that happens. Or if they're attempting to characterize the entire ecosystem as a Ponzi scheme and not simply as a means that actual scammers use to facilitate these scams. And so, like, really, this is the final stretch, I think, in this issue here. Like, this is a actual draft bill right now being pushed for by most, or seemingly most, of the institutions dealing with regulating and managing the economy and economic regulations in India. And it really just comes down to whether or not the new government after elections will push this through. And if it does, then this is going to be a very rough change for Indian Bitcoin users, and probably the most massive test bed as far as how Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies will function when they are outright illegal that we've ever seen in the world. And it's really just hold our breath and see what happens.
Yeah, man, I hope that the Bitcoin companies over there, are actually trying to really make moves to make sure those elections go favorably for them, because like you're saying, I mean, this would be pretty horrendous when it comes to the Indian population's ability to participate in this growing economy. And I mean, like, especially whenever they're already kind of under these fiat controls where they're already knocking out certain denominations. And it just, it sounds like a terrible way to be in a place where you can't really scrounge around for your daily earnings to buy your bread. I mean, it sounds like it could slip into that. And, you're looking at India on a map. I mean, I know that Pakistan has stressed their like sort of agreement in this. They'd like to also ban cryptocurrencies. I mean, maybe Sri Lanka or Thailand, like someplace in the Middle East, is like the closest areas to set up companies that could serve those areas. But for sure, they need something geographically located in India to actually, I don't know, that's to actually benefit from all this. And yeah, if you see this sort of legislation get enacted where nobody's allowed to even transact with any cryptocurrencies, and who knows what they're going to say as far as people who are like, is there just a fine or jail time? Does the fine end jail time? I mean, it's something like you're saying. We're going to have to hold our breath and wait and see.
So is Janine Nopar got anything to toss in the ring?
I was just thinking that what would happen if my country would say that, okay, from now, because in my country it's not very, so the regulations are not there yet. It's not like in the US that everything is already figured out. But in my country, they just don't care about it yet. And what would happen if they would say, okay, from now on, you cannot do any Bitcoin stuff, any cryptocurrency stuff? Would I have to stop developing, or I wonder what would I do in that situation? Probably wouldn't leave. I mean, it's tricky. It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's like, you're willing to take up the legal battle or just put it down where, not necessarily easier, but the idea of moving to a more geographic area that's favorable in regulations seems like a move that could, not slow operations as much as like a big legal battle.
Should move, cock.
I mean, wait until they start talking like this, then start thinking about it.
Go run back to Thailand.
On my way.
Alrighty, I guess Janine, if you don't have any input on this one, want to slide us along?
Yes, so as many of you are probably familiar with, in February and March, I was covering a scandal regarding Coinbase because in mid-February they decided to acquire an Italian blockchain surveillance company called Neutrino, which was, and by the way, not Neutrino as in, the filtering protocol or the Lightning light wallet stuff. Yeah, it's very confusing, but no, it was an Italian blockchain surveillance company, and it was a very obvious spinoff of another Italian company called Hacking Team, which is infamous for providing intrusion and surveillance tools to governments and corporations around the world, including those responsible for human rights violations. And if you haven't heard about any of this at all and want to get that backstory, you can check Block Digest episodes 159 through 162, because I pretty much covered that topic every episode between those two. And there haven't been any further developments since March, really, but at the beginning of April, a company with the wonderful meme name called In the Cyber announced that they had acquired Hacking Team, the original Hacking Team, which many suspected had ceased operating due to insufficient funds because no one was really hearing anything about them, although their website was still up and running. And the CEO of In the Cyber is Paolo Lezzi, and he was quoted in Motherboard as saying that the former CEO of Hacking Team, who is David Vincenzetti, would become his, quote, informal advisor, but would have no formal role within the company itself anymore. So why is this important? Because when Brian Armstrong made a statement in March to say that personnel from Neutrino who came from Hacking Team would be transitioned out of the company, many people warned that this would be just vague language, and it was entirely possible that they would remain involved with Coinbase / Neutrino as contractors or some other informal role. Now, since we have seen in another company related to Hacking Team directly use this exact strategy, I think it's pretty fair to say that the risk that this arrangement is also present at Coinbase is not off the table, and we should not stop being vigilant to the very real possibility that former or otherwise members of Hacking Team's upper management will continue to have influence on Coinbase's operations. And as I've said already on Twitter, in some ways, an informal position would actually be worse, because it would mean that they are being paid to have influence over the company without being held to the same standard of accountability for their decisions, which is already very low. And furthermore, Lezi also claimed to Motherboard that if they find that the tools that they create are being used for human rights violations, they will revoke the license for that client. And to be very frank, this is a bullshit promise. One, because Hacking Team made the exact same promise while they were still in business, and they not only failed to revoke or stop their tools from being abusively used by governments and other clients, but as can be seen in their leaked emails, they tried to obscure this culpability when it was discovered. And two, as far as I can tell, Saudi investors continue to hold a 20% stake in Hacking Team since at least 2016. And as we all know, Saudi Arabia is very well known for having a high standard for human rights. And I've seen no evidence that this stake was relinquished during the acquisition by In the Cyber. So and we also know very well that Saudi Arabia was a customer of Hacking Team, because one of the men they trained, Maher Matrib, is currently on trial for the brutal murder of a Washington Post reporter. And according to an email from January 2011, he was scheduled to train in Milan, where Hacking Team is headquartered, and receive advanced training from them. There's an excellent investigation that was published, I think, April 8th by investigative journalist Stefania, who I've mentioned a number of times before. And that also points to another man, Saad al-Qahtani, who allegedly oversaw the operation directly to kill Jamal Khashoggi. And so in that email from, I think it was January 2011, he, quote, contacted Hacking Team's then boss, David Vincenzetti, seeking a long and strategic partnership. He definitely wasn't talking about just acquiring Hacking Team's surveillance software, because as the emails reveal, the Saudis had already acquired the software and had been training to use it since at least 2010. So what kind of partnership was Saad al-Qahtani looking for, end quote. And I also believe, or in that article, it was mentioned that women activists campaigning for Saudi women's rights to drive have been targeted by this same team run by this guy and were brutally tortured. So yeah, great company you keep, Coinbase. You may have tried to wash your hands of this, but I'm certainly going to make sure that your company's name and Hacking Team will never break their association, because it's more than justified to be afraid of these people. And the fact that it's even possible that they could still be involved in your company to have access to your customer data is inexcusable.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, I mean, it's just awful that, it's crazy that they just like announced this, and it was just supposed to be something that they just thought wouldn't be a problem. And then to just quickly, turn around on that and about face, and everything was going to go under the water on this move, was very stupid. I mean, for sure, we're going to keep our eyes on this. And I really appreciate you keeping updating on us and keeping that thread running, because, for sure, this is something that is totally antithetical to Bitcoin and to the system at large and what all we're trying to achieve. I mean, this is Orwellian, and it's a good thing to hold their feet to the fire. Maybe one day they'll actually, start doing some things that could convince us otherwise than the possibility that these guys are still working for them in some capacity.
Yeah, this is like, I seriously cannot reconcile the rhetoric that comes out of Coinbase's mouth and just how much of a polar opposite it is compared to what they actually do. I mean, like it's just fucking mind-boggling, and the fact that these people still are associated or in any way or have access to anything is just absurd. Like Brian Armstrong fucking strolls around ranting about building the open and inclusive financial system and then does shit like this, which is literally not just rebuilding the totalitarian surveillance aspect of the old financial system, but actually accelerating it and augmenting it so that it's exponentially worse. And he has the balls to sit there and parade around in public and just spew this rhetoric and this placating nonsense that he's doing the exact opposite. It's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, and it was particularly disgusting to me that around the time, I don't quite remember when it was. I think it was after he made the statement saying that they were no longer part of Coinbase, or they were transitioning out. There was this whole marketing campaign. I think it was around Women's Day, International Women's Day, about how, Coinbase is doing so much work to help women have, get a foothold in the financial system, which they didn't have before. And it's like, yeah, but you're helping people. You gave millions of dollars to people who literally trained the people that were torturing women in other countries. So no, I call bullshit on your virtue signaling. And, at some point, I hope it will become obvious to you that you've done far more to harm women than you have ever done to help them.
Yeah. And also the countries that they have services in are not countries where women have not had access to financial services. They won't touch those countries. They won't set up shop somewhere like Afghanistan where that's actually the case. They'll just virtue signal in the United States.
Yeah, they did. That was another example. They did that interview with, I think she probably is the CEO of Code to Inspire, which is based in Afghanistan. And it's one of those, one of those stories of, how good charity is, because it was helping girls in Afghanistan learn to code and then paying them in cryptocurrency, because technically in Afghanistan, women are not allowed to they're not allowed to own property. And so Coinbase did this whole interview, and they said, they were asking her questions. And one of the big things that I remember from that interview was that the woman from Code to Inspire said that a lot of these cryptocurrency projects are building stuff that only serves the people who already have financial access. And she was literally describing Coinbase. Coinbase didn't even have operations in that region where she's based. So it doesn't make any sense to me that Coinbase can claim this kind of moral superiority that they're helping women when, as you said, like they're basically only servicing countries where the percentage of women who have financial access and, aren't like actively barred from owning or using money. It's not the case. They're servicing already privileged women. It's harder to get a Coinbase account, I would suspect, than, PayPal or any of these other online banking systems. And obviously they, like a lot of online banking systems, they've been participating in this whole blocking. I think they even did it to, there was a controversy recently, I think, where Violet Blue, who writes about like sex positivism and stuff, she was kicked off of Amazon. And I think she also mentioned that Coinbase kicked her off before that. So yeah, they're not helping women at all, and they're actively promoting and supporting people who have contributed to their harm.
Yeah, they're a lot of fluff. I mean, like they do the same damn thing when it comes to helping out people through economic strife as well, like they do with they had with the Venezuela and everything, but really it's just trying to draw volume onto Stellar or Zcash or something, and oh, here's how you improve your privacy, but really we're just trying to sneak you in this door where you're not really going to get it. But hey, they just offered XYO custody, so right? All right, if there's not any more comment, I could take us on to this next one. What do you guys got? Anything else?
Make
Go
it
ahead.
so.
All right. So the SEC is looking to get the public's opinion on all the blockchain madness going on out there. I'm talking about their upcoming Fintech forum, which will be open to the public on a first come, first served basis. They have made a couple of announcements about this open forum in the past few months, but just this past week they released the proposed agenda and panelists for the event. It's scheduled to be an all-day affair on May 31st and will be live streamed from the SEC's website. It's an event hosted by the SEC's newly formed FinHub division, which serves as the agency's public outreach on all fintech-related issues and initiatives. Here's a quote from the initial announcement on the forum. The forum is the second such forum to be hosted by the agency, will feature panelists from industry and academia, and is designed to foster greater communication and understanding around issues involving DLT and digital assets, close quote. The first forum was hosted back at the end of 2016, and a lot has happened since then. So I'm sure there will be a different tone now that we've gone through a major bull and bear market move. So it looks like the best speaker there will be Neha from MIT's Media's Lab, and then there are definitely some proposed panels that look to be a pretty big lull fest, which include members of R3 and IBM. But we'll have to watch and see how the discussion turns out. I'm sure that day we'll see a lot of clips and secondary discussion on Twitter and Reddit. They already released the hashtag for the day, being hashtag SEC FinTech. So not much new here other than the proposed agenda and a link to the live streaming site, which you could find that below in the show notes. However, if this is supposed to get the public's opinion on the matter, I'd just like to remind anyone out there who might be in the area, if you could go attend, get ready because it's coming up later this month. So just that FinTech forum going on is you guys think that this will be helpful? You guys remember the first one in 2016? I could not remember it. Like the last one I really remember as far as a big live streaming event was that congressional hearing with Coin Center and all those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think this will probably wind up being 95% bullshit and 5% somewhat useful thoughts or projects on things like tokenizing equity or pretty much like trust-based things that are just using a blockchain for an accounting mechanism and not really anything beyond that. And I mean, like could you imagine if like somebody showed up to talk about Mimblewimble and how you can just build something that you can't shut down and can't surveil? Or like here's a platform where you can issue illegal equities that you can't do anything to stop. Like those people would probably wind up on a fucking watch list so fast.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of just tokenomics and people trying to find ways to collateralize assets and trade them, and just traditional finance stuff being ported over to this new crypto economy and what all their plans are on that. I wouldn't expect much discussion about Bitcoin, but I'm sure on that day we'll start seeing a lot of people talking about some of the stuff they are saying, because I mean, it's the SEC and their position on everything is starting to sort of pick up pace. Like we saw them release their ICO framework, and they recently put together this FinHub division, and this is the first forum from that one. So it'll be good just to hear like where they're coming from nowadays, because we never really know.
No Para, thought right now. You're on the spot. What do you think?
Oh, I'm just looking at the news desk, and this will be really, really long.
It's not
No,
thought.
actually. So there was something that Rick said previously, that all these traditional financial things are going to port it over to Bitcoin, which is just, and my thought was there that, oh my God, I'm so unknowledgeable on this subject that I can't even decide if it's a good thing or a bad one.
Go ahead.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's not bad. I mean, it's like money is a special thing when you want to talk about like a system like Bitcoin. Like it needs to go to the absolute extreme of unstoppable, of uncensorable. But like when you start looking at more traditional things, like they don't really need most of that. You can build a lot of it in there if you want, but it's really just a different way to account like things. You know what I mean? It's still like you have to trust whoever is paying out equity on something in dividends, or you have to trust that something will be redeemed if you go to redeem it. But it's still like, I think that the more important side isn't like it being so much better at accounting for things. I think it's just that that little bit of efficiency lets you cut some middlemen out of the picture. Like that slight change in how you keep account of things lets you build easier interaction with things like Bitcoin. And really, I think the biggest changes in terms of old financial products aren't going to be like the kind of tokenized equity stuff. It's going to be derivatives, because when you're talking about derivatives, like you can build, I mean, like the forward contracts we talked about last episode, like you can build that directly on Bitcoin, where it's there is no asset involved in it that you have to trust somebody to redeem. All you have to do is trust an oracle, and those assets are Bitcoin. They are like the peer-to-peer money. And I think really that's where the most interesting stuff is going to happen in short term as far as rebuilding legacy stuff.
Sure, it's going to be something that I see them doing that. And I mean, like they'll find some efficiencies there and some people will get wrecked. And, it'll probably take a little while before we actually start seeing them do anything other than just starting to actually participate in the market, actually stepping in and developing things. I mean, there's been a few major companies doing that, and then all of them don't really appear to be knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, we got a couple that do though. So
Yeah. All right. So no more comment. Go into this next story where, let's talk about some speculation on exchanges. So it looks like the traditional players stepping into the space is starting to draw in some competition. Nathaniel Popper of the New York Times made a post last week on Twitter saying, quote, "In the wake of TD Ameritrade quietly opening Bitcoin trading for some of its customers, I was just told that E-Trade is preparing to begin offering both Bitcoin and Ether trading to its 5 million or so customers, and is just finalizing a third party to actually hold the coins," close quote. Bloomberg then broke the story and pointed out the fact that E-Trade would be the largest securities brokerage to allow trading within the cryptocurrency market. Also, that this could bring us to another level of legitimacy with investors who may be weary to pull the trigger into Bitcoin. Now, these claims are made from, quote, people familiar with the matter, and the person asked to remain anonymous because it's still private. Then E-Trade declined to comment. Although I wouldn't be surprised if it's true, with Fidelity and TD Ameritrade already jumping headlong into this market. Then there are companies like Coinbase and Robinhood who are valued at around $8 billion and $5.6 billion. I mean, also we have other major players stepping in, guys like Bakkt, and they're also doing things as far as trying to secure custody. It's hard to ignore the space and from the investment perspective, and it looks like E-Trade might also be making that move closer to the cryptocurrency market. So, it looks like we got this. These are the sort of institutional guys that are coming in, and they don't really have a problem because it's just kind of like adding an asset to their customers. So, what do you guys think about this? If E-Trade starts offering Bitcoin and Ether to their 5 million customers, I mean, it's a pretty big deal. I mean, we get pretty psyched about the digital assets platform from Fidelity. But what do you think about this one? You think they'll be able to compete? I know those guys have been around for a minute.
well, I mean, it really comes down, I think, to just how they handle it. Because I mean, you can do this in any way between actually allowing people to purchase and receive Bitcoin to just giving people exposure to the price. where like they're just holding Bitcoin that they'll never actually let you redeem. You can just sell it on their platform. And I mean, obviously I prefer platforms that allow people to actually receive Bitcoin out of it. But even if you don't, I mean, it's still a way to slowly start drawing people in and like get their toes dipped in the space. And it's really, if you're looking at like the ways people can benefit from Bitcoin, it's having exposure to the price is better than nothing, even if you don't actually have control over it. And I mean, that's probably how a lot of people are going to start getting into the space. I mean, like, if my grandparents were alive, I could not see them actually holding their own Bitcoin, but I could see them easily investing in something like an E-Trade product like this, and it's better than nothing. I mean, it's some way for them to see some kind of financial security from it, even if it could be better holding it themselves.
Yeah, that's about the same way I feel with all these traditional players coming into the space. Is like the idea of being comfortable holding your own private keys is not something everybody is. I mean, like you think about age groups really above 40, and I don't think they'll really ever be comfortable with that.
Look at the good side. There is more block space left for me to use.
Here. Alrighty then, Janine, I'm gonna demand a comment before we let you go to the next thing. You have to pay one comment on the toll booth.
Don't trust Coinbase. Delete it.
Okay, that'll do. You want to let us know what's going on with Brave?
Yes, another thing you should probably delete. On April 24th, Brave announced that they were launching their own ad network, which they have been talking about doing for a very long time. And the latest releases of the Brave browser for Mac OS and Linux would allow users to earn their BAT tokens by viewing, quote, privacy-preserving Brave ads. And they claimed that Brave users would be receiving 70% of the gross ad revenue, while Brave receives the remaining 30%. In their announcement, they even said that the Human Rights Foundation would be encouraging tipping in BAT tokens, which made me barf in my mouth a little. Also, you should be warned that you are currently not allowed to withdraw your BAT tokens from the browser wallet because they have not finished building a KYC system for their privacy token. And Brendan Eich was quoted in CoinDesk as saying, quote, if our users started taking BAT out on their own initiative, we would be defrauded overnight massively. So that kind of says a lot. And Brady Dale in CoinDesk writes further that, quote, Brave is working with its settlement partners such as Uphold and Coinbase so that when users can withdraw, they can withdraw to fiat if they prefer. So, yep, there's no irony in this whatsoever that a privacy token needs a KYC system to work. But if you haven't seen all of the reporting I've previously done on Brave being a giant clusterfuck, please see the list of previous episodes in the video description, such as number 59, 65, 122, and 149. I included links to all of them with direct timestamps, so my sections are easy to find in case you are not aware of why you should not use BAT tokens and why they've probably committed fraud.
Oh man.
Yay!
Yeah, that project is they're just fledging around trying to figure out what to do. I mean, they're one of those guys whenever the SEC released their guidelines on ICOs and everything, I mean, it was pretty evident that theirs was a security. So
yeah, and I just want to point out really quick, for anyone who doesn't know why Brendan Eich would claim that they would be defrauded if they allowed people to take their tokens out of the wallet without KYC, it's because basically because I don't know how their distribution system works, but most of it's just from Brave. It's not really the publishers. giving out tokens themselves. So what would happen is that someone could come along and start up a bunch of, bots that basically scroll through a bunch of pages that are connected to this Brave ad network. They would earn all of these Bakkt tokens, and then you'd basically be done. And it wouldn't be real humans reading the ads or looking at the ads. It would just be a bunch of bots. And so, I mean, I don't know how long it would take, but eventually, if that just kept going on, they would end up with all of the Bakkt tokens, which is absolutely hilarious. Like that, the reason that's possible is because this is a very centralized system. And apparently, in order to fix centralization, we need to introduce KYC for a privacy token.
Wow, it's almost like the entire internet ad market is widely manipulated by bots everywhere and fundamentally broken, and people just won't acknowledge it because everybody's pissing away money on it. Oh my God. But yeah, this whole project is a joke. I mean, it's like it just illegal security, like forcing KYC to actually sell the fucking token. Like the whole like horseshit rationale where they blame Bitcoin for not working when Janine actually digging to the bottom of it showed that the problem wasn't Bitcoin, it was Coinbase having high fees when they sent users to buy Bitcoin at Coinbase. It's just like the whole thing is a complete shit show. And it's made even funnier by the fact that they're trying to keep a broken ad model somewhat working instead of just trying to push entirely towards micropayments, which is something that you can't wind up with the type of Sybil problems that you do with ads.
Yeah, and let me take a moment to also point out, like, I literally told Brendan Ike, hey, Coinbase was the reason you got rid of Bitcoin because of their fee issues, which was caused by how they were managing coins. And so apparently that went completely in one ear, out the other, because now they're still going to work with them. And then Uphold, which is the centralized custodial wallet that they force everyone in this system to use. Uphold is the company that tried to, I believe, trademark or something or claim ownership of the Internet of Money as a phrase, which is something they absolutely did not come up with themselves. And numerous people, including Andreas Antonopoulos, used it way before they did. And now he's even written a book series using it as the title. So yeah, terrible companies. They haven't learned their lesson. And it's really gross that they're still perpetuating this absolutely false idea that KYC prevents fraud.
Yeah, it's a joke. I mean, like, I'm just looking up, like, it did start in 2017. Be wary of any of these projects that started in 2017. Everybody was just running for the money at that point. And yeah, Brandon Ike, you have fallen far on this one. All right. Well, like since these guys aren't going to help with privacy, let's move into maybe some help with privacy. All right. So you guys know Zap is out there creating one of the best Lightning wallets in the space with regular updates, improvements, and lots of activity on the GitHub and regular Medium posts explaining their updates. Well, now we are seeing them take another lead in drafting a privacy policy that matches the ethos of the space. This was announced on April 29th by the lead dev and all-around great guy, Jack Mallers. He says, quote, I just published announcing Zap iOS on the App Store. Sorry for the wait. There wasn't a privacy policy that represents all that Zap stands for, so I created the first cypherpunk one, close quote. And then there's a link to the Medium article. Jack shows off how far the community-driven project has come with some images of the early stage Zap and Zap today. And they have come a long way, and it shows. And he goes on to say, quote, Zap being on the App Store just changes how and where people will download it. There is still much more work to do. I have great ambitions and high hopes for the Lightning Network and for Zap. One of those is to have Lightning nodes running on everyday devices such as your iPhone. This allows users to use Zap in a non-custodial way without requiring a remote node setup. So with this move to the App Store, Zap's test flight alpha program will now be used to for test running LND on the device with Neutrino, close quote. And they hope to have the Neutrino-enabled Zap iOS ready by the end of this week. Now, one of the biggest issues for Zap when it came to jumping on Apple's iStore was drafting a privacy policy that reflected the company's vision. So they got together and drafted their own, and here's the meat of the policy. Quote, the company intends for users to be able to use the functionality of the app on a decentralized, anonymous basis. The company therefore does not collect, use, maintain, or share any personal information about you when you use the app, and the company does not use any tracking technology to track your use of the app. The company also does not allow third parties to collect personal information about you when you use the app, or to use tracking technology to track your use of the app. Any information that you provide us when you communicate with our customer or technical support departments will only be used for purposes of addressing your specific support request. Close quote. Now, it does have some other pieces you should look at when it covers the third-party app stores policies, as well as letting people know about the possible future modifications to the policy and how that will be handled. Lastly, they do try and cap the age limit on who's using the app at 13 years of age. So as always, Jack and the whole team at Zap stay pretty busy on all fronts, but you could reach out to them anytime via email, Twitter, Slack, or GitHub. And all those links and contact information, as well as the entirety of the privacy policy, can be found on Jack's Medium post in the show notes. All right. So how do you guys think, how do you think these upcoming updates and the new privacy policy will fare with the community?
I'd have to actually read through the whole thing, but based on what you summarized, it sounds pretty nice. But I do have to say, though, in implementing Neutrino, do not blindly follow proof of work. Use a trusted node. And I feel like this is something I'm probably going to wind up having to shit on all of the Lightning wallets that end up implementing Neutrino for, because that is just absolutely an unsafe way to design a wallet. And it's like I'm already angry just thinking about it.
We will fight it out later.
Yeah, this is one of those fights that's we're gonna have to hash out one day.
Speaking of which, kind of on a related topic, Shinobi, I don't know if you saw, but the Lightning Peach wallet actually changed their policies further, and they apparently now have 2 modes in their wallet. One is a privacy mode where they supposedly don't collect information, and the other mode is like, I don't know, they didn't give a lot of information. They basically deleted all of the incriminating parts from their policy and said, we now have 2 modes. One of them you give us data, one of them you don't.
Okay. 1, bullshit. 2, still never going to use it. 3, bullshit. And 4, that's literally fucking impossible for their streaming payments. The whole thing is organized through Bitfury's servers. You're full of shit.
Well, so apparently the privacy mode doesn't allow for streaming payments, I think.
Okay. Still, fuck you, Bitfury. Never going to use it. Go fuck yourself. Like, you're useless now. That was the selling point of that wallet. Those 2 things that wound up leaking private information to you. So if your mode is turn them off, why the fuck would I use your wallet?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Bitfury is, I don't know, man. Last I saw, they're trying to pull some sort of investment trust out there, but I don't know what they're doing other than that. And yeah, trying to unwind privacy on Lightning. But for sure, the wallet situation and people trying to figure out ways to do this with the custodial aspect and either like you're saying, the Neutrino setup and how exactly that all works. Like, there's a bigger discussion there that everybody should be talking about in the space. And Like, because I mean, I've heard a lot of, you know, well, you know, we've got to, you know, the idea of fully validating it just, it's one of those where, you know, I don't know if people understand how important that is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like it's fuck that company. I mean, like seriously, it took like us kicking up a shit show to wind up with this result. Like, fuck that. Like, why the fuck would I use anything from a company where they don't do anything properly or with the user in mind at first? You have to kick up a shit storm of people screaming at them to get them to do things properly. But anyway, all right, guys, are we ready?
Yeah, let's hear it, man. I know we got another meaty one in front of us.
All righty. All right, so Intercontinental Exchange and Bakkt are back in the news. So they have confirmed, like I was thinking, that they are trying to file as a registered trust in the state of New York. So that would allow Bakkt to legally custody things and would effectively clear the regulatory barrier in front of them from actually launching and going live. And in the process, they have acquired the Digital Asset Custody Corporation. And so I'll come back to that in a second. But in going through the announcement of the trust filing and the acquisition of DAC, they've kind of gone through the entire architecture of their cold storage method, which Bakkt has built up from the ground up, which is effectively what most of their resources have been spent on, as they're effectively going to be listing this product on an actual regulated exchange and not building an exchange from scratch. And they've created an isolated system with both a hot wallet and a cold wallet, and claim to have a $100 million insurance policy underwritten by leading global insurance carriers. So they're not actually specifying which insurance companies are handling this. And they have a number of features, specifically with both wallets, including multi-sig for all of them, as well as multi-factor authentication to process any withdrawals, role-based permissions. So I'm assuming something like different entities can accomplish different tasks or interact with balances up to different thresholds, as well as whitelisting withdrawal addresses. So you can set things up so that under no circumstances would a withdrawal be processed on your behalf except to previously whitelisted addresses known to be under your control. Now, as far as the actual key security, they're using a FIPS 140 level 3 HSM to manage their hot wallet. So they're pretty much using one of the highest standards of hardware security modules to manage the keys on that, which is distributed geographically and set up to prevent any kind of key extraction, again in a multi-signature setup. As far as the cold wallet, they've encrypted, sharded, and geographically distributed the keys in an M of N architecture, and under no circumstances are transferring keys or key shards over any kind of unencrypted communication channels. So any kind of movement of this information would not only involve the materials themselves being encrypted, but would only be done over an end-to-end encrypted channel. So there's effectively two layers of encryption safeguarding the transmission of any sharded key materials in the process. Now, as far as physical security, they have everything stored in bank-grade vaults and data centers with 24/7 physical security with strict access controls to certain areas based specifically on employees' roles in the company, so that sensitive information is highly compartmentalized and access only allowed to specific individuals. As well, because of the geographic distribution of the system, there's actually no individual employee who would be able to access information at any individual location to actually be able to accomplish anything. And in this way, they're not only dealing with potential outside threats, but firewalling things so that potential internal collusion actually has protective measures as well. And this is involving everything from access cards, physical security, down to biometric information in order to access sensitive materials. As well, they have a constant ongoing assessment by a red team of professional security experts that are constantly assessing their infrastructure and providing new threat modeling and ways to mitigate any potential identified threats to sensitive materials. And so when we move on now to their acquisition of DAC, the digital asset custody company, DAC has already produced and built a setup security-wise that is pretty much identical to what Bakkt has built from the ground up. And so you might be asking, why even bother acquiring this company in the first place if Bakkt has literally designed a similar setup themselves from scratch as a core of their product? And pretty much the big reason behind this is that DAC actually supports many different assets in terms of these custody products, whereas Bakkt seemingly has only built these systems up for Bitcoin itself. While DAC has support for Bitcoin, Ripple, Ethereum, Stellar, Bcash, EOS, Litecoin, Monero, Dash, Ethereum Classic, Zcash, Bitcoin Gold, Zen, and over 100 ERC20 tokens and tokens on other platforms like EOS. And so it seems really the only reason to acquire DAC in the first place is simply to be able to take the support for all of these different platforms that's done in a way that's compatible and up to par with their own solutions, to be able to port all of the support into Bakkt's products and platform without suffering any kind of security degradation, obviously ignoring any kind of inherent flaws in the platform itself, but simply a degradation of security in managing keys and access controls to assets on these platforms. And, really looking at this, I like to see that they have, really thought this through to the point of engineering a system that could be secure in holding hundreds of billions or theoretically even trillions of dollars of assets in the future. And they're taking the steps to actually get through the regulatory red tape and launch this. But at the same time, this acquisition of DAC, it really bothers me for two reasons. One, even legitimizing all of these shit coins. I mean, I honestly cannot look at a single one of these platforms supported by DAC except Monero that isn't just an outright scam. And even in Monero's case, it's providing a legitimate use right now, but not a legitimate use to institutional investors, and not one that's going to last, because the platform is just not scalable. And so it's like you're just legitimizing scams. And then two, legitimizing these things on this way on the scale of institutional investors, like this isn't when these things start imploding and hitting fundamental like scaling limits, things start falling apart, inherent architectural flaws start breaking things. Like this, you're not just talking about reckless retail investors, you are talking about large, massive institutional money that has a huge role to play in terms of the overall stability of the global economy getting wrecked by these platforms, and whatever allocation moves to them just falling to shit. And I think that's just a very reckless and unwise move, given like who is actually behind like Bakkt. It's the largest stock exchange in the world. And it's very disappointing and to some small degree kind of worrying to me to see them make this acquisition in with the intent of supporting this kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, like last week checked up on it. I mean, like I think the whole thing was they were trying to push back the date because they were looking at getting into the custody side of things, and it is upsetting to see that they're talking about like 100+ assets. And like I heard you say Tron, are you kidding me? Like they're trying to get people involved into those sort of assets. I mean, this is where, yeah, I was kind of fearful that if we didn't sort of nip this scam world in the butt, that there was going to be this moment in time where all these scams were going to be offered very easily to, millions and millions of people, and they might get a lot bigger and cause a lot bigger problem than I was expecting if we could have just somehow avoided this issue. But I mean, it's hard to say how we would have done that. But yeah, I guess this is going to get them in a closer step towards actually getting that approval that they need. But for sure, this development of all these custody for all these platforms is something I'm not too happy about.
I have a fairly unrelated problem, but still somehow related, because I don't want it to seem nitpicking, but you said Monero is unscalable, and just today I had the thought that, hey, okay, if Monero is unscalable, then we should be able to compare directly against Bitcoin privacy technologies, the scalability of Monero, and look at exactly which uses more. like we could build mathematical models, not even that hardly, and we could see that which uses more bytes, right? What really matters is the bytes, the bits and bytes, which uses more if you are using this privacy technology in Bitcoin or you are using Monero. That would be interesting to write and also to read, because I probably won't have time for that. But what do you think about that? Never mind. It's unrelated, so go with the flow.
The scaling issue with Monero is more the ring signatures and not byte versus byte. It's like if we put CT on Bitcoin, there's still a UTXO set. You can tell which outputs are not spent yet right now. But with Monero and ring signatures, like you can't tell which outputs have been spent or not. So you literally have to keep every output from every transaction ever. And that just keeps growing. And it's yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I see what you're saying. But we still would be able to compare it in fairly objectively, like what Batcher said in the episode a couple of episodes ago, that you see, every privacy technology actually adds to the blockchain some space, except the Lightning Network, because that's the only one that actually takes away things from the blockchain. So yeah, it's like you could even compare a lot of privacy technologies just based on how scalable they are. I think it's really interesting.
But it's just I don't know. With this back thing though, it's really just kind of disappointing to see that this level of player is just it's winding up the same incentives that current exchanges have. Like they don't give a shit what's viable or sound or not a scam. It's let's toss it all out there, and if people buy it, we make money, and it's just disappointing.
Maybe that's what the SEC was looking for in their ETF. It was only going to be approved if you offered 100 plus shit coins. All right, Janine, were you the one talking about Ledger today?
Yeah.
Indeed.
So another thing that happened on April 24th is that the CEO and co-founder of Ledger announced that he would become the new executive chairman of the board, and the position of CEO would now be filled by the former president of Ledger, who is Pascal Gauthier. Now, most people would probably not have looked twice at this announcement because who really cares about a minor shuffle in leadership? But if you read the statement from Eric, former CEO, in the third paragraph, he wrote, "I have therefore decided, with the support of the board, to move to a new role as executive chairman. In this role, I'll be able to properly focus on strategy and vision while also overseeing regulator and government outreach, partnerships, customers, broad business relationships, and technology through leadership. I'll continue to interact with the crypto and consumer communities and help Ledger to fulfill its mission of securing all types of critical digital assets," end quote. And before we went on air in my newsfeed, I saw an article which I believe said something about that there's been an increase in crypto companies that are putting money and focus towards lobbying governments. So I guess it isn't unique within the current regulatory climate around cryptocurrencies, but I still find it suspicious that a hardware wallet company would be trying to oversee regulator and government outreach, because how much really is there or should there be?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely been some more talk with lobbyists and government regulators and people who are drafting the legislation. And I've just seen also I recently was looking at Shapeshift's new platform where they're trying this new thing, and I was looking at it, and it's like they have some sort of interrelationship with KeepKey, to where this new exchange is going to be like KeepKey is going to be a part of it. And like maybe that is something that they're working to build out, is like some sort of ledger relationship, custodial relationship towards an exchange. But I don't know, that's just me bringing in some speculation from something observed like with KeepKey.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me because a bunch of other hardware wallet companies I don't know if they want to be custodians, but they want to make partnerships with exchanges. So that doesn't surprise me, but I would be curious to know what exactly they are thinking of when it comes to government outreach, because if they're selling devices, I mean, what are we going to get? It's not like they're included in, like, for example, the European Union legislation, which says that you have to be KYC'd if you're a custodial service, or you have to KYC your customers if it's a custodial service. So, I mean, hardware wallets aren't, so they shouldn't be facing that kind of pressure. Obviously, governments would want to put backdoors into these things, just as they want to put backdoors into all kinds of consumer devices, but I hope that these companies won't actively accept and participate in that effort.
I have an inkling of what they're up to. Ledger over the last year or two has been partnering with Japanese companies to build custodial devices for the exchanges out there, and that's like one of the products most people aren't aware that they're doing. Like they don't just build consumer facing devices, they're trying to build hardware devices to do key management for actual exchanges and other custodial businesses. And I would not at all be shocked if Ledger was trying to do some greasy, shady shit, like have a government or governments step up and create some kind of licensing or qualification scheme or standards that would have to be met by any exchange in terms of hardware used for key management, and attempt to push that in a direction, crafting things in their favor so that they can kind of position themselves to be the only government approved way to manage keys in certain jurisdictions for any kind of exchange or custodial business.
That's interesting.
I mean, where are you going to benefit from lobbying the government as a business and ledger's position? Like, well, if you have a product like that and you are already making international outreach to create partnerships around it, that seems like the logical place.
Yeah, I don't think you're far off on that. That's probably is the best guess. I mean, like you're saying, as far as like hardware wallets working with exchanges, it's like, well, what's going to be the government oversight on custody for exchanges and what all is involved there?
Why they need to? I mean, it's like lobbying is like this whole dynamic. It bothers me because on one side, that's going to be a necessary thing to some degree to stop governments from doing absolutely retarded things. But it's just look at reality. When you have companies or entities lobby a government, they don't do so neutrally on behalf of open platforms or a whole ecosystem. They do so in a way to create a slanted benefit for themselves. And so it's very much a double-edged sword in that regard.
All right, man. Well, you want to take us into this pretty awesome little development?
No.
Come
Okay.
on, let's get to some cool news.
Alrighty. So a Japanese company, Nayuta, has just dropped. I'm not sure if this is pronounced Pitarmigan or Ptarmigan, but it is a brand new Lightning implementation, and so far is the fourth implementation of Lightning to go live on mainnet. And it is obviously being released in so-called reckless mode. So it's definitely something that you should be very careful with. Only use small amounts, and it's definitely not going to be anywhere near as mature as any of the other implementations like LND, C, Lightning, and so on. But it's written in C++. So now we have clients in Go, Scala, C, C++, and Blue Mat is still attempting to not really create a proper client, but at least a library built in Rust. And so this is, kind of giving a nice fleshed out landscape here where people can actually contribute to core clients and not just interact with them through APIs in languages they're familiar with. But I think that Nayuta is taking a very interesting approach in terms of, what they actually plan to do with this. I mean, like, so far, really, it's the three main implementations prior to this. They're just general purpose implementations. And I mean, each of them is kind of taking their own approach to how to architect it, but ultimately they're just general purpose Lightning clients. Whereas this implementation by Nayuta is specifically being designed to run on very small devices with as little resource requirements as possible. So they're actually on their site right now trying to give away at cost a Shield, an Arduino, and a Raspberry Pi Zero, which is literally only like 2.5, 3 inches long and costs $5. And the current version being released is, or the version of the software is being released in an SPV mode. so that the entire client can effectively run on this $5 Pi Zero without the overhead of a node required. And it's really just steering towards specifically developing a Lightning client catered to small integrated devices, very low resource requirements, the kind of thing that can be built or used to build, laps or small pieces of hardware interacting with Lightning in a mechanical way, like something you can build for $5 to plug into a vending machine to work with Lightning Network, or some of the little gadgets, or a dirt cheap point of sale system that would have as low of a cost as possible to make it practical for as many people as possible to actually have a physical point of sale system to accept payments over Lightning. And I think this is just a really interesting niche and kind of overall development for people actually building things with Lightning, because we've seen the three main clients come out and people start building all kinds of interesting applications and software products, but there hasn't really been much development on the hardware side in terms of integrating things aside from the Lightning nodes that we see being sold prepackaged. And I think this company kind of concentrating on a fully fledged Lightning client with as little resource demands as possible can really open things up in terms of like what can you actually build Lightning into in the physical world, like not what web apps you can build or little micro payments platform on the internet, but like what can we actually embed Lightning into in the physical world. And I'm really interested to see where this goes forward, because there's always been a lot of speculation and kind of just brain farting about the kinds of stuff you can do. But this company is actually trying to put the software out there to really make it as simple as possible to actually start building those things and throwing them out there in the world and seeing what happens. And I think it's going to be a really exciting driver going forward.
Oh yeah, man, that lightning shield, I was looking at it, I watched that video, I immediately got into my mind that, you remember whenever those developers made that bike where you could do a Lightning Network transaction and it would pay like by the minute or second or something on your like renting the bike. And I just like immediately thought like, man, doing that sort of project will be so much easier with this type of device, where if you have an idea of a way to actually implement Lightning for a payment system in the meat space for some sort of device, now there's not much of this barrier to entry as there was before, when it's like, well, you got to have somebody that not only is efficient in the Lightning Network, but somebody that is also working on the engineering side and the know-how of like, this is what the market would need. And I mean, now it's like you could just get some engineers together who have an idea and they can order one of these devices and they can start testing. And that sounds really cool to me.
Yeah, because I mean, the big problem with trying to build things like that is just all the friction and the impracticality and the costs and the overheads. And when you can boil that shit down as much as possible to as little resources, as little overhead, as little things that you have to hack together yourself, like it's easier for more people to tackle things like that. And we're not really going to see how practical or realistic that type of application is going to be until people start doing it and testing it. And like this is walking us down that road of making it easier to do that.
Yeah, man. And C++ Lightning, that's awesome too. All right.
No para. Thoughts, Lightning Network. Cough it up now. What do you think? You never talk about Lightning. When wasabi?
Yeah, again, I'm doing this all the time, this show. But again, you had a comment there that, oh, it's awesome because now we have client in this language and in this language and in this language, and there we will have well, not really a client, just a library by Matt Colero in Rust. You seemed like the less excited about that, while I'm the most excited about that because I'm a developer and I don't want to use a fully featured client. I only need the library part. So anyway, just a quick comment on this. What do you think about this, or should I move on?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I am excited about that. It's just I'm not going to be super excited until it's here. But yeah, like that is absolutely a good point. Like, this is like a library is going to be much more valuable in terms of like somebody actually being able to build something from scratch themselves, as opposed to kind of being slaved to somebody else's project and building on top of it. But it's, I'm kind of holding my breath until it's actually here. And also another aspect of that is just Rust being in like natively memory safe. So like that whole class of like fucking things up is going to be way less of an issue too. Alrighty though. All right, I'll stop pulling teeth and trying to make you talk about lightning, Opar. What's going on with Schnorr?
Schnorr. So Schnorr is a very interesting topic because you see, I have a problem that until I don't code something, I don't understand it. And when I got something from secondhand informations, then from time to time I realize, oh no, I still don't understand it. I still don't understand it. And the last iteration on Schnorr was when you told me in Thailand, actually, that, well, Schnorr is great, but this is going to be interactive, so people have to sign on top of each other. And you remember that so far?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, but now I was talking with Harding and Nick Jonas, and they were telling me that that's not really the case, because people can give nonsense commitments to the server, and the server gives out all the commitments, and then it only introduces one more round, and then every client can sign. So it ends up not being as much of overhead as it would be. So yeah, I'm again very excited about Schnorr. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty cool, but I would imagine though that would kind of be unique to using it for coin joins. You know what I mean? Well, I think, and correct me if I was wrong, because I think I was drunk when we had this conversation, but I was more thinking about just like general purpose, like multi-sig use. You know what I mean? Like if like you and me were in a 2 of 3 wallet, like there's not necessarily some static server to coordinate that between the two of us. And so like in that case, like that's still kind of a little more of the complexity with interaction than like a coin join where you have that central point everybody's coordinating through. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's the first time I've heard of a person talking about multi-sig while they're drunk.
Oh, I just wanted to say that too. That, yeah. So I didn't think that through. You might be right. I will think that too. True. Yeah. Regarding drunkenness, I mean, yeah. If you think about it, instead of chasing girls and stuff, we were talking about Schnorr while we are drunk, and like, just what the hell are we doing with our lives? Anyway, the other interesting, well, it's news. It's news for us, probably for the digest audience too. That so Schnorr is actually just an enabler, like a bunch of things depending on Schnorr, and now Bitcoin core developers are trying to sort it out in what order they should implement all these things. Those are depending on Schnorr with a very safe, without putting everything into one soft fork. And it seems like that signature aggregation. So what is the important part for CoinJoins? Those are going to be lost because they are so interconnected with everything else. So yeah, we have to wait a couple of years for that. But anyway, the point is that now we don't have much of a technical issues with Schnorr. We don't have much practical issues with Schnorr anymore, at least as far as I know. And then when we will start implementing it, then we figure out, oh shit, this is not working as we were thinking it was working. But this happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's one of the reasons I'm not so impatient about it. It's like you get things right. And like the funny part is, like, a couple of days ago, like, somebody posted on our Bitcoin, like, Bcash is implementing Schnorr. Can we just copy and paste it from them? And Greg Maxwell, like, responded and, like, broke down, like, pretty much what you just said. Like, you know, Schnorr by itself doesn't really do anything. It's just the stepping stone to all of this stuff you can do with it. And all the idiots in Bcash just copy pasted an old test implementation of Schnorr without any of that other stuff in it, and that still had like some flaws and fuck ups in it that would prevent doing all the other stuff. And so it's like Bcash just like shoved themselves in this retarded corner, just being morons and not paying attention to what's going on. And so if they were to ever try and do any of the interesting things like signature aggregation and shit, it'd be a clusterfuck of them trying to like figure things out and reverse engineer and figure out how to do it, because they just fucked up from step one, just copying and pasting something that's not really set up to build into any of that stuff. That was just like a test, like as far as implementing it.
Well, they have the advantage of hard forking easier.
If you ignore the fact that every hard fork has left another coin behind.
That's true. All right. So what's going on with Shinobi? All right. Yeah. Hydro-Quebec Bitcoin auction policy overturned. What does this even mean?
So this is some awesome fucking news. If anybody watching now watched our first special edition last year with Jonathan Bertrand, somebody very heavily involved with the mining scene in Quebec, there was a long string of bids that were presumed to be fake for massive amounts of electricity from Hydro-Quebec for Bitcoin mining. And Hydro-Quebec is pretty much the biggest power provider of hydropower in Quebec. And, you know, they looked fake, but based on a lot of other things we dug up afterwards, I am of the opinion that it was Bitmain effectively trying to find somewhere to deploy a shit ton of unsold hardware they had. But it led to Hydro-Quebec creating a cutoff where no new mining operations would be allowed at current electricity prices. And off the bat, came with a 300% increase in electricity prices for new mining operations and a shift towards an auction system where Hydro-Quebec would set off a chunk of electricity, and instead of there just being a rate for it, all of the companies that wanted to mine would effectively have to go through an auction with the highest payer getting the allocation of electricity. And this completely fucked up the entire landscape that made Quebec such an attractive place for Bitcoin mining operations. Well, the end of last year, Quebec went through a election and pretty much had the government, from my understanding at least, in October, swing a lot more to the right. And in Canada, electricity management is pretty much done on a province by province basis. And so the new government, after getting in power and situating themselves, have effectively decided to override Hydro-Quebec's auction policy and new pricing scheme for mining operations and roll things back so that there will be no auction system. There will be no 300% increase. And they've actually explicitly ordered them to set aside 300 megawatts of capacity specifically for mining use in the crypto ecosystem, on top of the already 368 megawatts committed to mining operations now. And so Bitfarms, a big mining business in the province that's kind of a vertically integrated farm, electricity provider, and housing company for people's equipment, is now continuing an expansion that was put on hold that I think would take up another 30 megawatts of capacity. But this, in the meantime, this has, during the time that this policy was in effect, probably had a very negative consequence for miners in the area. But, having rolled this back now, this is really correcting a big fuck up in terms of Hydro-Quebec looking at the overall dynamics of the ecosystem. And it's now, anybody at a decent scale now can get the 5 cent Canadian per kilowatt hour price that large scale industrial consumers get in terms of electricity rates. And it's really making Quebec a much more competitive place in terms of mining operations again. And I think this was a very, very good development as far as just decisions by the government in the area. And I know a lot of people are not going to want to hear this, but, this is one of those situations where it kind of shows that sticking your head in the sand and pretending the government will go away if you ignore it doesn't work. And it's actually not really anything to do with Bitcoin itself, but just the overall activism of more conservative people in the province, which swung this election the other way, is ultimately what resulted in this policy being rolled back. And at the end of the day, it's a very good thing for miners in Quebec, regardless of how much you want to say, fuck the government, I'm just going to ignore it.
Yes, certainly. I mean, this is, definitely good news. I mean, it's one of those things where we say, participation with government entities is not always pleasing for sure, but it's something that could be helpful in the long run. And this is one of those times where it paid off. Because, I remember whenever we had Jonathan on at that time and seeing how it was the whole contracting system was being overrun with people setting in large bids for all the space, to where it wasn't really that competition there. It was just big players coming in, buying up all the space, and it wasn't really serving the smaller or medium-sized farms at all. And now, there's a real possibility that competition could come back. And it's a great thing. I mean, let's use this as an example whenever people ask questions about, oh, well, why should we be doing this? It's like, well, every now and again, it works in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it only works in your favor to the extent that, the two-party system is like, your mouse being attacked by two cats, and one of the cats says, oh, well, I'm just going to bite off your head and eat you slowly. And the other one says, oh, well, I'm not going to bite you. I'm just going to throw you around. You're not going to die. And it's like, well, of course, want to choose the cat that just throws you around, but it's still a cat throwing you around.
Better than dying.
Maybe there's some parasite I'm carrying that's going to make that cat commit suicide later.
Of course, the solution is we need more cats, apparently.
Always more cats, man. Never, well, except for Shinobi. I don't think he likes cats too much.
My cat's Satan incarnate.
All right, man. So what's going on with this Chainalysis webinar?
Yes, this is just a quick note because it didn't happen yet. So you can register for Chainalysis webinar. They are going to talk about the DragonEx exchange. I really enjoy these webinars because there are information circulating in our little bubble here, and when you go on the other side and start to listen to the information that they have, they can tell new things about you, to you. So that's fun. If you want, check it out. May 7. Trigger warning. You have to give your full name, email address, and phone number to register to this webinar, which of course you can give fake ones, so don't worry about that. Maybe you want to set up a guerrilla mail email address for that. A phone number is really interesting. I think this is the first time they are asking for it. So I actually left it empty and it was complaining me, and it gave me an example phone number. And I just wrote in that example phone number and it accepted it. So, well, yeah.
My name is Bob Nutsenmouth at bobnuts@gmail.com. Phone number 1-800-fuck you.
My name is
Yeah,
Ross.
whenever services ask me to give a phone number and it's not, a security, I mean, if it's a security feature, it's like, well, fine, I won't use it. But if it's just like a box you have to fill in, there's literally a website that it's not only fake phone numbers, but it's phone numbers that are unused, but they will still appear as active. And so it doesn't look like, it's not like you're not just picking someone's random phone number. So yeah, you can just look up a website that gives fake phone numbers that will actually get accepted, and I use that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, there is just absolutely zero reason to have that information. Like, oh, like
Well,
what?
I mean, they are a blockchain analysis company.
Yeah, yeah, yes. All right, Jenin, you wanna take us to
What
I don't
is
know,
this last one?
yeah, to a very intense topic, let's say.
I'm not going to say too much because this is more of a final thought. But if you want to see what happened today, it was the first hearing of now 3 that are scheduled in London for Julian Assange regarding the US extradition request. So basically, he went to Westminster Magistrates Court again with the same judge, the very bad, nasty judge, Michael Snow. And it was kind of disturbed because originally the hearing was supposed to start at 10 a.m., but they chose a different courtroom that I think was deliberately too small to fit everyone who had actually gotten tickets to be in the gallery. So only about, I think it was maybe 30 members of the press were able to get into the gallery to see the proceedings. But yeah, so that happened. And during the hearing, obviously, the judge asked Assange, will you surrender to the US? And he obviously said no. And then the second procedural, this was mostly a procedural hearing, and the second one is scheduled for May 30th. I don't know what the purpose of it will be. But then they've already scheduled the third hearing, which will not be procedural. It'll actually start to get into the request and the allegations and all of that, which is on June 12th. And the judge further said that even when that hearing comes, he said the full substance of the case will take several months to go through, which for anyone who doesn't know, that basically means that the entire possibility for the Swedish case to be reopened and actually be viable in any way has basically closed, because one of the one of the investigations for one of the women was closed. Well, no, they were both closed. One of them was closed because the statute of limitations expired in 2015, and the other one was closed because basically Sweden decided to close it. They didn't have enough evidence. They interviewed Assange, and they didn't decide to proceed further with the case. And so that was closed. So there's currently no investigation open whatsoever in Sweden. There was never any charges. There are no charges at all for Assange at any time, at any point. People are still messing this up where they're saying that there were charges, there are charges. No, there's no charges whatsoever. And so if this timeline proceeds in terms of the actual trial or fight against the extradition request beginning in June, and then if it's true that it will take several months to hear the full case, that basically means that the second statute of limitations for the other allegation ends in August. Well, yeah, it's a bit it's still possible that it could work, but they expire in August 2020, and so that would mean Sweden would have to reopen the investigation, despite the fact that the investigators have already deleted or destroyed the case file for that second investigation. And so I don't know if it's even possible for them to reopen it if they wanted to. But yeah, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen at all. And the one interesting thing, I mean, you can read what actually happened at the hearing I made a second blog post to cover the hearings specifically. And obviously I said it's World Press Freedom Day tomorrow. And oddly enough, the UK Foreign Secretary was a speaker at the event in Ethiopia. And he had the lack of awareness, he had enough lack of awareness to actually quote from a South American novelist about truth. And he said, "But truth there is without doubt, and it is the greatest force of all. For however much you beat him with your sticks, however fast you chain him, I swear there will be a time when truth will escape from his chains and throw you to the ground hurt and ashamed." And the reason that's ironic is because when Assange was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy back in the beginning of April, he tweeted to say that he was like thanking Ecuador and President Moreno for, kicking him out, which is, it's just weird that he would be a speaker at a press freedom conference and then, turn the other cheek or look the other way when it comes to Assange's case in his own country.
Irony. Gotta love it.
Yeah, I can't wait to dig through this and see where exactly this is going, because I know that this is going to be one of those cases where for sure the mainstream is not going to be your source to go to. And I know that, the developments on this are going to be moving fast. So really appreciate you doing the legwork on all this, Janine.
Alrighty, so that finally brings us to final thoughts. Who's up?
All right, I'll start. Let me get you a link. I think you know what I'm going to be talking about here. Okay, so my final thought today goes out to some people here locally. When I started off this meetup in 2017, there were lots of people who showed up during that time of the bull market. I was seeing attendance of like 50 to 60 people. And you guys know that the bear market struck and that kind of distilled all those crowds down. But, the hardest Bitcoiners remained. And this couple, Sage and Tracy, were the first two left at some of our meetups with the lower attendance. Then they continue to show up at every event we were hosting every couple weeks. We became very close friends, and Sage saw my frustration whenever I moved to this new apartment with this new internet connection that was giving me trouble. And so he came over here and fixed it for me and helped improve that system to where I don't have any issues anymore, free of charge. And then last year both invited me to Thanksgiving since they knew I didn't have any family in the region. And they're really great people, heavily into the Bitcoin scene, even though he doesn't really tweet that much. But unfortunately, last month, Sage was struck with an aggressive form of brain cancer and had to rush into emergency surgery to remove a grade 4 glioblastoma brain tumor. It's an aggressive form of cancer that has a high likelihood of returning. Luckily, he made it through the surgery and is now fighting at all odds to stay positive in the face of uncertain times. With diagnosis like this, attitude could make all the difference. And right now, he's trying to remain positive and looking at a stack of medical bills and the future bills involved with upcoming chemo treatment and therapy to help recover. And I've got a link to his tweet where there's a GoFundMe page, and he also has 2 Bitcoin donation addresses, one a legacy address and another that's Bakkt32. And I actually tweeted this out earlier in the week. Maybe you guys saw it. And he had replied to the tweet saying that the Bakkt32 address was a Wasabi wallet, and all donations will be CoinJoin to help improve privacy and fungibility on the network. And he's a great guy, great Bitcoiner, and he's just going through some really difficult times. And if we can maybe just throw that link in the chat and the show notes, and hopefully, you guys can, if you can help, if you could consider helping, I'd appreciate it. I know that Sage and Tracy would also be very appreciative.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things that Bitcoin really enables is you can just help people who need it. Like there's nothing in the way. There's no Western Union. There's no bank telling you can't send money here. So, like, if anybody has anything to spare out there, help somebody.
Yeah, I'm speechless. Not only because of this case, but because of what my final thoughts would have been. That actually I was. So if you don't know, I'm quite young, and before Assange went into the embassy, I didn't know anything about him. I was young, right? So I started to watch back the shows he appeared and his public appearances, and it just makes me really sad. This guy is so brilliant, and and what they are doing with him, and what potential he has. I I I don't know. It's such a fucked up situation. Like he's a criminal. His criminal things is that he's exposing crimes of governments. Like, makes no sense. That's it.
Well, the amazing thing, I don't know if you guys have seen the pictures that were taken yesterday when he had the sentencing for the bail violations, but he looked like so much younger. He actually looked like how he looked like before we saw him being dragged out of the embassy on April 11th. And so, like, if that doesn't prove that there was something seriously wrong going on in the embassy where he seemed to, like, age so much, and then he goes into a high security prison for 3 weeks and comes out looking younger, like, what kind of person goes into a high security prison and comes out looking younger than when they went in? That makes no sense.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation. I remember whenever he was on early TV shows coming on for interviews, and I always picked up on like the fact that WikiLeaks was going to be revolutionary, and what they were doing was a great service for the population at large, and in better understanding what their government is doing. And it is really sickening to sort of think about how much pressure they put that guy under, and how he was, a freely moving person being interviewed on TV shows. I mean, he was kind of, he was very cypherpunk about where he went. I mean, he wasn't trying to like announce anything. And I mean, he was worried at that time. And to see how far it's escalated and where he's at now, it's definitely upsetting if you think about. And it's crazy, but I mean, like, he's fighting through it. I mean, the guy's still fighting.
Mm-hmm. And well, I guess my final thought isn't really a thought. I'm going to subject all of you to music. And so, on that note, before I subject your ears to this, I think we're all going to say adios, and we'll see you next week. And then you're not allowed to disconnect until the song is done. So say bye, everybody.
Later, everyone. Enjoy the song.
Bye.
All right, switching sound input now. Don't unmute, or we'll give them feedback.
Tony Galipi. Hey, I'm Brian Fabian Quain. They've very kindly decided to join me, and we're going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin scaling. So let's begin. Why aren't there any songs about scaling? And what's on the other side? Scaling's a buzzword and just an illusion. And Blockstream's got nothing to hide. So you've been told and you choose to believe that. Well, you're from RBTC. Someday we'll find it, a scaling solution. In the meantime, just do a hard fork for me. Brian, they can't just do a hard fork, lickety-split like that. Who said that wishes would be heard and answered when wished on the morning star? All the stakeholders will fuck up a hard fork. Just look what they've done so far. What's amazing are transactions relaying and increasing difficulty. Someday we'll find it, a scaling solution upon which we all can agree. That sounds really amazing, like something we can all agree on. Kind of like how boobs are awesome. Yeah, Tony, you have like a one-track mind. Honestly, have you been half asleep? Or do you know SegWit? Barry's been lobbying my name. No, he hasn't. Is that the nice guy that tweets about classic? Yeah, the classic Ethereum chain. I've heard SegWit 2x is shit, so ignore it. But it's too confusing for me. So many choices for scaling solutions. Yeah, there's SegWit, sidechains, and Lightning. La da dee da da dee da. La da dee da 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 da. I harmonized. We send the epicenter Bitcoin, everybody. We send the epicenter.